Okay. This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, book 26, the second Sicha of Yisro. So we're going to be asking several questions on Rashi, and then we're going to get to a fundamental understanding of what it means to serve Hashem. And I warn you in advance, it may be a game changer. It may change the way you interact with Hashem afterwards, for the good, of course. In the pasuk that says the first pasuk, the first verse of the Ten Commandments reads as follows: "Anochi Hashem Elokecha hotzitecha me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am Hashem your God. It took you out of Egypt. Took you out of Egypt." Just 1 second. I am God who took you out of Egypt, says the verse. And Rashi says, "Kedaihi hatza'ah tetiyu mishu avadim li." Let's see how they translate it in the English. Taking you out is sufficient reason for the fact that you should be enslaved to me. In other words, the context is that I'm going to give you a whole slew of commandments. I took you out of Egypt. You guys were slaves. So now it's Kedaihu. I forget the translation here. That's sufficient reason. That's
subservient.
That's sufficient reason that you should be subservient to me. Then Rashi brings another two interpretations about why Rashi about on this verse, but we're going to talk about that later in paragraph 5. In the meantime, you want to understand whenever Rashi comes and explains something, it means there's a difficulty he's trying to forewarn or trying to answer. What's the difficulty here? The pasuk says very simply, God comes with his business card, so to speak. I am Hashem your God who took you out of Egypt. And he starts telling it like that's an identification. Why does Rashi have to say that there's an inner meaning here? I am God who took you out of Egypt, and that's enough reason that you should be my servants. Where does it say that in the verse? I mean, you could read it in there, but why does Rashi add that to the verse? What was bothering us if he wouldn't have said it? So the Mizrahi, one of the foremost commentators on Rashi, and other commentators say that the question Rashi encountered, thinking, what's the 5-year-old who reads this pasuk? What's he thinking? Is why does Hashem identify himself as being their God who took them out of Egypt? Why doesn't he say, I am God who created heaven and earth? If he wanted to bring credentials for God, the bigger thing you would imagine is that he's the creator of heaven and earth. I am Hashem your God, the creator of heaven and earth. I took you out of Egypt. That's amazing, but creator. So that's why Rashi is telling us the reason Hashem introduces himself as the one who took you out of Egypt is because I'm about to tell you to be subservient to me. I'm about to give you a whole slew of instructions. You should know I took you out of slavery, and that's why I have the right to give you a new set of instructions. Whereas if I'm just Hashem who creates heaven and earth, he also has the right, but it doesn't translate immediately to subservience, as much as identifying himself as particularly taking them out of Egypt and now asking them for their commitment. This commentary, this interpretation, however, is a little bit not smooth. Why not? Because we're going on the premise that Hashem could have said something greater than taking them out of Egypt. He could have said, I created heaven and earth. That's not a question. You know why? Because Hashem is coming to identify himself here to the Jewish people that I am Hashem, your God. Jewish people, listen closely to me. I'm Hashem, your God. How does Hashem become the personal God of the Hebrews? He took them out of Egypt. So when he comes to the moment of Sinai, he's about to give them the Torah, and he's saying, I'm God, your God. We don't really have a question why he identifies himself as the one who took them out of Egypt. That's the basis for the special relationship that Hashem is having with the Jewish people, because he took them out of Egypt. So it's not a big issue. That therefore, again, if there's no question, why does Rashi provide an answer to a question that doesn't seem existent? And the question is even greater about why Rashi has to comment. The concept of going out of Egypt, that going out of Egypt is the basis for Hashem being the God of the Jews. We've had it before several times. Immediately in the book of Exodus, the beginning of the book, it says Hashem tells Moshe, tell the people, but or Hashem tells Moshe, when you take the people out of Egypt, they will go and serve God on the mountain. Talking about Sinai. Similarly, in the beginning of the second portion of Shemot, the Parsha of Va'era, Hashem instructs Moshe to tell the Jewish people, tell the Jewish people that I'm going to take you out of the suffering of Egypt, and I'm going to take you as a people, and I'm going to be your God, and you will know that I am God who took you out of Egypt. This language has already been used multiple times. More than that, in our portion itself, in the lead up preparations to the giving of the Torah, it says that Hashem tells Moshe, tell the Jewish people, you have seen that I took you out on the wings of eagles. I brought you out. I lifted you up. I brought you together here. Now you guys should listen to me. You should be a holy. I want to make you a holy people. Keep my covenant. So Hashem is already in previous verses connected the going out of Egypt to the saga, to the great gift that's about to unfold at the giving of the Torah at Sinai. So why does Rashi find it necessary at this first verse of the Ten Commandments to somehow explain why Hashem is using the terminology of I am Hashem your God who took you out of Egypt? And Rashi jumps in and says, took you out of Egypt, that's already good enough reason for you to be subservient. That correlation, taking out of Egypt, being your God, has already been used multiple times before. Why here does it jump out? Paragraph 2. There's also a few other nuances in the language of Rashi, which we want to take a look at. First of all, when you read very simply that Rashi says, I want you to be, Hashem is saying, I took you out of Egypt, and that's good enough reason that I want you to be subservient to me. So these words, to be subservient to me, we would assume that they are the meaning of the beginning of the verse, where it says, I am Hashem, your God. When somebody's your God, what does that mean? It means you have to be committed to them. He's the God and you're the subject. You have to do what he says. So to be subservient to me, that would seem to be the extrapolation of the verse that says, I am Hashem your God. Which would mean to say that the continuation of that verse, which is, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt, taking you out of Egypt is a reason for the fact that I'm your God. Since I took you out of Egypt, that's why I'm your God. And that's why you have to listen to me. You have to be subservient to me. As it says, and we say it every day in the Kriyat Shema, when we say the portion of the tzitzis, then the end of that portion speaks about going out of Egypt. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God, who took you out of Egypt, liyot lachem lelokim, to be your God. In other words, Exodus happens, and because Hashem redeems us from servitude, that's why he's our God. We have to serve him. Thank you. So if that's the case, that the words, I am Hashem your God, really indicate that that's why we have to be his subjects, we have to be subservient to him, it's not understood. What's not understood? First of all, and this is technical, Rashi, when he comments, he always quotes the words from the pasuk that he's commenting on. Here, Rashi doesn't bring the words, I am Hashem your God, in the heading. He starts the heading, who took you out of Egypt. If the subservience of the Jewish people to God is based on Hashem saying, I'm Hashem your God, that's what it means. You have to be subservient to me. So why didn't Rashi use that as part of the heading and then expand that in his commentary? It says, you have to be subservient to me. That's question number one. Question number two, in most of the places where Hashem connects him, that I'm your God and I took you out of Egypt, he doesn't say this, what he says here about the Ten Commandments, that this is enough of a reason that you should be subservient to me. He just leaves it at that. I'm Hashem your God, to be out of Egypt. Why here does he comment? Verse comment 3, Rashi should have said, not you should be subservient to me. That I took it. If we're paraphrasing the verse, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm Hashem your God, to say that they have to be servants, the language is used should be, I am Hashem your God. You should accept my godness. You should accept my sovereignty, my kingship. Why does Rashi change from the language of the pasuk and say, you should be subservient to me? Changes from the language of God, of sovereignty, which would have lended itself very easily to the interpretation of saying, I'm Hashem your God, you should accept my godness, my sovereignty, my rulership. He doesn't. You should be subservient. Why not say, accept me as your God? That would be seemingly the same thing, but it would be more in line with the syntax and with the language of the pasuk. So we could perhaps answer that. Where does Rashi get the subservience angle from? From the end of the pasuk that continues, I am Hashem your God who took you out of Egypt, the house of slaves. There's slaves there. You should be subservient to me now. But if that's the case, so Rashi should have, that's the case, if this is the case, doesn't really fit. Why? Because Rashi, Rashi could have used the same language of the pasuk. You should be my servants, not you should be enslaved to me, subservient to me. If we're taking the subservience clause, avodim, because it says, I'm Hashem who took you out of Egypt from the house of servants, the house of slaves, and therefore you should be my slaves. But Rashi doesn't say that. Therefore you should be subservient to me. That's not the same as being a slave. It's not the same language. Why does he change the language if he's based on the house of slaves? So, right, clearly he's not based on that end of the verse, house of slaves. Moreover, in the heading, remember, we said the Rashi, there's always indications in the heading that Rashi uses about what he's really intending to comment on. If you say he's commenting on the end of the verse that says from the house of slaves, he would have put it in the heading, or at least in the heading where it says, I'm God who took you out of Egypt. The heading is, who took you out of Egypt from the house of slaves. If he doesn't want to say the whole verse, Rashi very succinctly knows how to write, etc. The gomer, etc. He should have said etc., which would infer that he's commenting on the rest of the verse. So this all tells us that he's not commenting on that. There's something else going on here in this pasuk that Rashi is teaching us. Okay? Put on your seatbelts. Get ready for the ride. Paragraph 3. Till now, if you haven't been able to keep track, don't worry. Because now this was a build-up. These are the questions that are getting us to understand that we can't just read the Rashi as we would half asleep or dulled into just thinking it's, be subservient to me. The Rebbe has peeled it away and said that Rashi is telling us something very profound that we need to look into and understand what he's bringing to the table and why you have to say it. So paragraph 3 says the Rebbe like this. We could say the explanation like, the question that Rashi is addressing about why the pasuk starts, I am God who took you out of Egypt, is not why Hashem connects him being God with going out of Egypt. On the contrary, what's the news about that? What has Hashem told them that they didn't know before? As we said, many times Hashem has already told them, you're going out of Egypt. The agenda is, the end game is Sinai, right? So they knew. And Moshe was instructed to tell the Jews, even in the build-up now, the days before giving the Torah, you saw I took you out of Egypt, and I carried you like on the wings of eagles, and I brought you to me, and you got to listen to my voice. You're going to be a holy nation. So now he's coming with big news. Hashem comes to the Ten Commandments with some kind of a statement. I am Hashem, your God, who took you out of Egypt. Hello? That's what he's been saying that the whole time. Like, why is that a big pronouncement as if it's the first of the Ten Commandments? It's this big. So Rashi says it's a big pronouncement. You know why? I'm not explaining who I am. I'm God who took you out of Egypt. You know who I am. You know I took you out of Egypt. I'm telling you something else. This taking you out of Egypt is sufficient reason that you should be subservient to me. What does subservient mean, by the way? I don't think we know what subservient means. Get ready here. I am Hashem your God means accept me as God. You know, if you take on the ruler, the king is God, and therefore obviously you have to listen to his commandments. If he's the king, you got to listen. It's the way it works. He's the commander. Then Hashem adds something else. It's not enough just to accept me as a sovereign and to pledge allegiance and to listen to what I say. That's not enough. You got to be subservient to me. What does that mean? See, when somebody accepts the sovereignty, the kingship of a ruler, it doesn't mean they lose their private life. In the whatever the king wants from you, of course you do. But the king is the king, he has his rules, and you have some kind of a private identity, some kind of an independent life in a usual relationship between a king and a subject. Yes, accepting the kingship of the sovereign means that the things he wants, you do, no questions. In the real kingship, the real kingdom, there ain't no questions. You don't do what the king wants, finished. You do what the king wants. But he's not encroaching, so to speak. He's not getting into every single nuance and detail of your life. There are things he tells you to do. There are things he tells you not to do. You're a law-abiding citizen. You do everything you're meant to do. Similarly with Hashem, there's a concept where Hashem has the mitzvahs that, get up, daven, do this, don't eat that. Great. That's still not what is meant by subservience. Here Hashem saying, I took you out of Egypt. I want you to be subservient. That means I want you to be non-independent without separate identity. You're not going to have your own freedom. You're totally subservient and sublimated to God. Everything that you have, everything that you do. What would that mean? That would mean, the Rebbe says in a footnote, that, there are some things in the Torah Hashem doesn't say. Hashem says, if you do it, you get rewarded. If you don't do it, nothing happens. One of the prime examples are the wearing of tzitzis. Very popular today, thank God. But really, technically, why didn't everybody always wear tzitzis? The obligation of tzitzis is, if you have a four-cornered garment, you must put fringes, the tzitzis, on the four corners. If you don't have a four-cornered garment, you don't need to have tzitzis. So do you have to go and buy a four-cornered garment with tzitzis? Well, if you want to connect to God, yeah. So if you're a private citizen, independent guys, of course, what God says you have to do, you do it. He says not to, don't do. I don't have to go buy four-cornered garment. But if we understand, what does it mean, Mishua Badim? If we understand the Mishua Badim means subservient, it means my whole existence, my whole being, my whole persona is bound up in Hashem. It can't be a possibility there's going to be something that I'm not going to do. I'm going to try and connect to Hashem in every way possible, every fiber of my being. In today's reading of the Torah, it says, Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayered Moshe min har el ha'am. When he had a message from Hashem, he came down from Sinai 1 or 2 days before 3 days before the giving of the Torah. He went from the mountain to the people. Rashi comments, he didn't go home. But go home? A mission from Hashem? He was all about God. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have an independent identity. This is after hours. I got to go home first. I had overtime. I was up on the mountain. Coming home, it's late. Overtime. I'll first go, freshen up and thing, and then I'll go to the people tomorrow when the office opens up. No such thing. Go straight from Hashem, from the mountain, straight to the people. He's on a mission that consumes him totally. Subservience in the fullest sense. So that's why Rashi says, Hashem is saying, I'm Hashem who took you out of Egypt. That's enough of a reason that you should be subservient. Not on the condition that you should be subservient. On the condition, I mean, like there's two things. I did this on the condition that you do this. He says, no, I took you out and you this makes you come into my service in a complete and consummate way. Or another way to look at it is it that we have 613 mitzvahs? Or is it that we have an overarching obligation to be totally subservient to God? It expresses itself in the 613 details. Is it like, okay, here, I'm signing my life over to God. The details, I'll read the fine print, there's 613 things to do. Or is it, I'm signing a deal with 613 details. It's a subtle difference. But is it that surrender totally to God, be subservient to him? Or is it, I'll be good, there's this, in Hebrew they call it, Yelet Tov Yerushalayim. I'll be like, good Jerusalem, my boy. I'll do everything I'm meant to do. I won't do things I'm not meant to do. But hey, I got a little piece of myself as well. He says, no, going out of Egypt, Mishua Badim. So now we can understand that this is the big news of the first of the Ten Commandments. Not what was till now. I took you out of Egypt. You should accept me. Do my commandments. No, I took you out of Egypt, and this makes you, in the fullest sense, subservient to me. Paragraph 4. Kunis will also understand why Rashi doesn't quote in the heading the continuation of the verse, I took you out of the house of slaves. He doesn't even say etc. to hint to it. Why? Because it's in subservience and slavery is totally different. When somebody talks about being a slave, that doesn't mean he doesn't have any independent identity, any freedom of spirit, at least. Because even though we say that halachically a slave doesn't have his own identity in terms of ownership, he belongs totally to his master the day that there was slavery, right? Today we don't have that. But when there were really slaves, a real slave belonged, he was like the chattel, he was like the property of his master, not like an employee who has his own identity. He's just committed to working for the employer. A slave means everything he has really belongs to the master. What he picks up, if he finds a lost object in the street, can't pick it up for himself. A hired worker could. He said, right now, look, I'm working for this guy, but he didn't hire me to pick up lost objects. He hired me to go and, to go take his car to the mechanic. If by the mechanic I found a lost object that I'm legally allowed to keep, it's mine. I'm not an extension of him. Yes, my work I committed to him, but I also have my independence. A slave, if the slave takes the car to the mechanic and he finds something there, whatever he picks up belongs to the master. But still in all, there's a situation where it could be there's free time. It could be that the master doesn't need the slave at this moment. He can go and rest. It could be, in other words, there's some independence, at least conceptually. He doesn't have to go look what work he could do for his master. The master didn't give him work right now. Could rest. When you talk about being subservient, Mishuabad means that your whole entity is subservient to the one you're being subservient to. And it's a constant yoke. Interesting, we use that same Lashon Shi'abud when it comes to money. When you have money that you owe somebody, so your property may become bound up and obligated to somebody else. It's totally Mishuabad means that there's no two ways, there's no independence to it. It's like if we talk about ourselves being subservient to Hashem, we're totally obligated to Hashem. Anything that we do, we have to feel Hashem's presence. To the extent if right now there's no mitzvah for me to do, still, you have to feel connected and subservient to Hashem. Your whole entity feels bound up in Hashem. That is what the Torah is saying, what Hashem is saying in the beginning of the Ten Commandments. I took you out of Egypt, and that's the reason you should be totally mishu'abadim, totally subservient to me. In other words, what the giving of the Torah created a reality by the Jews that they become avdei Hashem, servants of Hashem. But that fact that they become servants of Hashem, that would be enough to say, I'm Hashem, your God. If He's our King, so obviously we belong to Him, right? He's our God, He's our King, so we belong to Him. So Rashi doesn't have to comment about that. I am Hashem, your God. Okay, we got to listen. You're God. We're the subjects. We got to listen. Then Hashem adds another dimension. Who took you out of Egypt? There, says Rashi, Hashem's taking it to the next level. And that is that the taking you out is enough reason that you should be totally subservient to me. In other words, even though technically what I've told you till now, says Hashem, is that I'm taking you out to meet my people, and that does not preclude the fact that you could have some level of independence, do my stuff, but still be independent. Now at the giving of the Torah, at the first of the Ten Commandments, Hashem is imprinting within us something even deeper. I took you out of Egypt, and now that kind of subservience is going to be handed over, is going to be your relationship with me on that level. Because don't forget, in Egypt they were engaged in backbreaking labor. And to the extent that at some stage, Paro had forced them to bring incredible levels of work, much beyond whatever they would be able to do. Therefore, Hashem says, I saved you from this kind of enslavement. This is enough grounds that you should now become a subservient to me on the deepest level. Okay, so I don't know if everybody's going to love this so much. Sounds like it's very consuming. But I want to point out that the greatest liberation is to be totally surrendered to Hashem. Hashem is not asking us, it's not asking us to have a life of deprivation, to have a life of pain. No. Actually, it says if you eat less and you indulge less and you toil in Torah, you'll be happy in this world and the next world. Oh, the next world, of course, being spiritual. How is somebody happy in this world if he, as the Pirkei Avot says, if he eats limited and he drinks limited, sleeps limited? The answer is, we all know that what seems to be fun, what seems to be pleasurable in this world by overindulging is actually just a short-term thing. Even in this world, it's not a long-term. So this is not talking about it. It sounds a little bit wow. Be subservient to Hashem, always consumed with our relationship to Hashem. He took me out of Egypt, and now I entered some new kind of service. Yeah, but you didn't enter service to Egyptians. Now you entered being part of the greatest kingdom possible, being one with Hashem, being able to be totally subliminated to Hashem. It's incredible. Actually, this is an opportunity. It's not so much an obligation, but you were so subjugated to the Egyptians when I took you out, and now you're able to be, rather than be surrendered to them, now you're in my service, which is the highest, greatest thing possible. Paragraph 5. According to this explanation in Rashi, that I've taken you out of Egypt is not a reason why Hashem has to be our God and we have to listen to him. On the contrary, it's introducing a new dimension in our relationship to Hashem, in our servitude to Hashem. Then Rashi brings two more interpretations of why Hashem said, I am God who took you out of Egypt. One interpretation is, he says, look, Hashem revealed himself at the splitting of the Red Sea like a strong, mighty warrior. That was the way Hashem interacted. He smote the Egyptians, he split the sea, and the Egyptians died, and strength. Here, Hashem's coming in the guise, so to speak, like a zaken malei rachamim, like an elder full of mercy. Like it says, the imagery, the feelings they had at the mountain of Sinai was one of compassion, of Hashem's light, Hashem's benevolence. So, since I change my interactions with the world, lest you say, God forbid, that there's two different forces. He says, no, I'm the same God who took you out of Egypt. Don't worry. I'm just interacting differently. Here at Sinai, I'm interacting in a sagely, venerable, benevolent way. I'm the same God who took you out of Egypt and beat the out of the guys, right? Did the stuff there and split the sea and killed the Egyptians. Same God. Don't worry. So that's why he identifies himself. This God who's appearing here now is the same. God forbid there's no, it looks different from the actions, but no two forces, God forbid. Or another answer, because they heard many voices coming, echoing from all over the world, from all four directions, the voices of God came, and from up and from down. Hey, guys, don't think there are forces that are reverberating and emanating from all the different places in the world. There's no more than one force, no more than Hashem. And then Rashi says, why does Hashem say, I am Hashem, your God, singular? He's speaking to a collective of millions of people. Why doesn't he say, I am Hashem Elokechem, your God? In Hebrew, there's a difference. Your God can be said singular or plural. He uses the language, I am Hashem, your God, singular. Why doesn't he say, I am Hashem, your God, plural? He's speaking to the plurality, to the community of millions of 600,000 men over the age of 20. probably 2 or 3 million people. You know why he said singularly? To give Moshe the chance to ward off the prosecution when they did the golden calf. When they did the golden calf, the prosecution comes and says, hey, you just told them not to have any idols. 40 days later, they go and they worship a golden calf. You know what Moshe said? Hashem, they misunderstood that you were speaking to me. You said, I'm Hashem, your God, in singular. Who are you speaking to? Obviously, I was up there closest. Speaking to me, you didn't tell them. You can't hold them accountable. So Moshe used it as a loophole, so to speak, so that Hashem shouldn't unleash his wrath and totally destroy the Jewish people. Incredible, huh? He uses it in that way. So now we have to understand that's the Rebbe. Rashi doesn't just bring us allegory to make, for us to enjoy a deeper read of the Torah. Rashi is here to give us the simplest read of the Torah possible. So why does he add these other two things about Hashem appearing like a sage or like a... What didn't we understand if he wouldn't have said that? He doesn't add things unless we need it in order to understand the verses. So, I mean, to make a mistake that there's two forces, how could it be after they saw all the all the miracles? They saw the miracles of Egypt. They saw the miracles in the splitting of the sea. They're standing at the mountain of Sinai. Now Hashem has to tell them, hey, guys, by the way, it's not two gods, the tough warrior and the benevolent one at Sinai. Come on, you would expect that they would know that. What's, I don't know, it's not, it doesn't seem to be something that needs to be said here. Even the fact, okay, you could say, well, he appears different because he's acting in a very different way. That's not enough of a reason to really make a mistake, because we understand that even a child understands when he interacts with somebody, the face changes. It's the same person, an angry face, he has a benevolent face, right? The face changes. So why would a person think when Hashem is doing an act of benevolence and kindness at Sinai and relating to them like an elderly, so to speak, parent, he would look one way, and when he is a warrior, fierce warrior at the splitting of the sea, killing the Egyptians, it looks a different way. That wouldn't be enough grounds that the person should think maybe there's two gods. That's why Hashem has to say, no, I'm that same God who took you out of Egypt, even though now I look benevolent. Especially, you should say that there's many, because the voices come from all directions. Somebody would make a mistake to think there's many forces. And besides that question, when did Hashem appear like a benevolent elder to the Jewish people? That was already on the 5th day of the month of Sivan, 1 or 2 days before he started saying the 10 Commandments. So why didn't he right away say, I mean, this is 2 days after he appears benevolent. He let them think for 2 days that maybe there's different forces. Why didn't he say right away that he's one unified force? And in the other interpretation we gave, that said because the noise was coming from 4 directions, up and down, one could have thought maybe there's multiple forces, godly forces, God forbid multiple gods. It's hard to say, though, why, if so, does Hashem... One second. Latent Satan pressure. The art for does not do with them. Girlfriend does as an evidence. Not sure about this. Rashi says this question: why does Hashem use the singular? It's not such a question. We find that Hashem sometimes speaks to the plurality. Speaks to, for example, when we say that the Bnei Yisrael encamped at the mountain of Sinai, it doesn't say vayachanu, the plural, and they camped. It says vayichan, and he camped. So we understand that, it could, a singular could be a plural. However, see, there's a big problem. Hashem spoke, but Hashem spoke singular. Think about this. What kind of a mistake can that lead the Jewish people to think? Hashem says, "Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm Hashem your God." That means I'm just speaking to you. They could think maybe the voice coming from the other direction, which is also saying, I'm Hashem your God, is another God saying to the other singular person, I'm Hashem your God. You understand? They're hearing the noise coming from all directions and it reverberates, I am Hashem your God. If there's one voice that reverberates, I am Hashem your plural God. So you can understand maybe easier that it's one God who's bouncing off from all directions. But if the language is I'm Hashem your God singular, there's a bigger chance that a person may make a fatal error to think that there's multiple gods weighing in from all directions and each one only addressing one singular person, maybe a couple of million gods, each one speaking singular. So there, God forbid, there's a big issue here. Why does he speak singular? So we said, why does he speak singular? Because he wanted to give Moshe Rabbeinu a way to save the Jewish people. And he was ready even to endanger this mistake because he wanted to give Moshe a way to save the Jewish people later on to say, you didn't speak to them. You spoke to me. You spoke singular. At any rate, whatever way we look at it, I was a little unclear on presenting this, but however we look at it, we want to understand why does Rashi have to bring these other interpretations to the table? We could have learned the pasuk very fine without it. But now what we're saying is, according to the way we've just explained, that Anochi Hashem Elokecha Hashem your God is one thing. That's why you got to be my servants. But Asher Tziticha B'Yisrael, I took you out of Egypt. That's why you have to be subservient to me to the fullest degree. Now we'll understand why Rashi brings other interpretations as well. Because the continuation is, I am Hashem Asher Hotzeticha. Really, the verse doesn't read well in the way we interpreted it. It says, I'm Hashem that took you out of Egypt. Not I'm Hashem who took you out. And then a new thing, I'm Hashem your God. And then a new thing, and I took you out of Egypt so that you should be subservient to me as much as you were, more than you were to the Egyptians in Egypt. The Asher seems to be that Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm Hashem your God. It took you out of Egypt. There's a direct connection. So to explain the direct connection, Rashi brings two other interpretations. The reason Hashem has to say, I'm the God who took you out of Egypt, because there were some people that may have thought, God forbid, the different attitudes of God, tough at the sea, benevolent at Sinai, may have led people to think there's two different gods. So that's why Hashem says, I am the God, same God who took you out of Egypt. But there's a continuum there. Or some people may get confused because there's so many directions and Hashem speaking singular, maybe there's a bunch of gods. Say, no. I am the God who took you out of Egypt. There's only one of them. There's only one of me. I'm that same God. Okay, so now we understand, just to recap, this Rashi is giving us a depth. It says, I'm Hashem, your God. Period. Who took you out of Egypt? That's why you got to not just be my people, you also have to be subservient to me in a consummate way. And then Rashi says, but there's also a simple way to read the pasuk. I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt. And indeed, Hashem is identifying himself as the one who took you out of Egypt, because there may be a mistake, because he looks different at the different experiences, so to speak. He acts differently. Okay, beautiful. So now we understand that our service of Hashem is to be to that extent. We understand that Hashem wants to make sure nobody makes a mistake thinking that because he acts differently, that God forbid there's different deities, there's different warring factors. He's one, and he controls all of reality, and there's no warring factors. There's just one unified God. Now, paragraph 6, the Rebbe drives home a point that's compelling and inspiring and also almost radical. The end of Rashi goes like this. We mentioned this. Why does Hashem speak singularly to the Jewish people? I am Hashem, your God, without saying your, plural, in order to allow Moshe to be able to defend the Jewish people after the sin of the ego, of the golden calf. Says the Rebbe, here is an incredible lesson how much every Jew is beloved by Hashem. Which kind of Jews are we talking about here that Hashem is trying to protect? Not just that these are low-level Jews. Not just he's not totally subservient, we talked about the highest level of subservience. Not just is he not at that high level of subservience. More than that, they think that they're about to do idolatry. About to do idolatry. 40 days later, they do idolatry. These are low level. They fall to the lowest level of idolatry. Yet Hashem is thinking, I'm going to insert into my opening statement of history the connection of God to mankind in revelation. There's only one revelation of this nature. It's Sinai. Sinai never happened before, never happened afterwards. The keynote address of God, he changes one of the key words, which could create confusion. He changes it from plural to singular. Why? Because those woe-begone Jews, some of them may fall to the abyss of idolatry, and Hashem wants to insert a loophole for Moshe to use to be able to save those Jews later on. So he changes his masterpiece, his what is it called? Deca. What is the
Decalogue?
Decalogue. The Decalogue is the most historical piece of connection of God to this world. 620 letters in the Ten Commandments come for the 613 mitzvahs plus the 7 mitzvah rabbinic laws. Every word there is distilled. Shem is distilled. It's the highest form of God's connection to the world, God's communication to the world. And he changes a word there. He slips in a singular instead of a thing. Why? Because there's going to be these silly souls that are going to fall into idolatry, and Moshe has to save them. More than that, in a way, Hashem is allowing a greater chance for error by doing that. Because by saying, I am Hashem, your God, singularly, people may mistakenly think that the reverberations coming from all the different directions are different gods, speaking singularly, each one to one person. So there's more room for error. And by the way, the loophole is a really, in Yiddish, there was a shvacha. It's not such a good loophole. It's kind of a weak point for Moshe to use. You said, I am Hashem, your God, singular. They didn't think it was speaking to them. He was speaking to me. Come on. Hello. They knew who I was speaking to. But it is some kind of a loophole, but it's not a strong one. So Hashem went to the pains, even for such a Jew, even to leave even more room for error in a certain way, but he wanted to leave at least a weak argument for Moshe Rabbeinu to be able to save the Jewish people. And you know what? If somebody wants to make a mistake based on the words he used, no. The one who wants to make a mistake will make a mistake. What's the lesson to each and every one of us, says the Rebbe? We have to be involved in bringing near and bringing close each and every one of the Jewish people. There's no reason, there's no room to make any calculations that with this Jew it's worthwhile. Here, he's a high-level Jew. I should be spending time on him. The second Jew, a little schwacher. So the Torah says, no, in the first commandment of the 10 Commandments, Hashem puts in a word that's altered in order to leave room to be able to find merit on a Jew that fell into the worst hole of sin, which is idolatry, the golden calf. The opposite of I am Hashem your God. So this is a guy who violates I am Hashem your God. And in the I am Hashem your God, Hashem puts in a safety valve for that person. No, that tells us that that's where we have to act. Never think, well, maybe that guy doesn't deserve to be helped, to be brought close. No, especially, says the Rebbe, this will be in every generation, especially in our generation, says the Rebbe. Most people in our generation that we're trying to bring closer to Yiddishkeit are in the classification of what's called a tinok shenishba lebein ha'akum, a child that was taken into captivity when he was still a little child, a little baby, was raised amongst idolaters. Can't hold him responsible for anything. It's not like he grew up a Jew. He knew what it means to be a Jew and he chose to opt out. He never in the first place knew what it means to be a Jew. And by the way, it doesn't mean to say he was raised by non-Jews. He could have been raised by Jews, but without a modicum, without the basic essentials of living and experiential Judaism. Just like he grew up amongst, you're going to blame him? It's not his fault. He doesn't keep. So of course, in our generation, there's no room to look at a Jew as being outside taking huge efforts to try and help, to find ways to reach such Jews and to bring them close to Hashem. Through this, that will bring all Jews close to our Father in heaven. That will bring that big crowd that it says, a Mashiach comes, Kahal Gadol Yashuvu Ein. There'll be a big crowd of Jews that goes back with Mashiach. Be able to go greet Mashiach, speedily in our days. That's a call to action, my friends.